So what we're going to be talking about today is this is the Florida Black Bears 101. And we've never done this before, so this is a first time out. And hopefully it'll be educational. And you might learn something that you didn't know before about the Florida Black Bears. My segment today is going to be about public policy in regards to the black bear population in Florida. If you didn't know already, let's see. The Florida black bear is a subspecies of the American black bear. So its genus and species are Ursus americanus, and then the subspecies is Floridanus. Actually, there are 16 total subspecies of black bears in the United States. The Florida black bear, Ursus americanus floridanus, spills over into South Georgia and South Alabama. So they're actually Florida black bears in those two other states. But as it regards to public policy in the state of Florida, we're just going to talk about the Florida black bears. Now, the black bear population in Florida is distributed in patches around the state. And each of those patches has a correlating bear management unit that has been carved up by the FWC. So you have, for instance, South Florida, you have a West Panhandle, an East Panhandle bear management unit. And you can see they have different range sizes. The central black bear management unit is very large and probably the most populous. You have very small populations around Chassahowitzka, and those are a very small fragmented population. But for the most part, the large populations are the central, south, north, up there in the Osceola area in the East Panhandle. That's where we had hunting in 2015. This is another view of a more recent map that shows the bear population, where bears are frequently seen, where it's common to see them, where they're occasionally seen, and where it's rare to see them. As you can see, it's rare to see them in Southeast Florida, but not so much Southwest Florida. The bear ranges have changed over time. You can see in this slide, 1978, 1992, and 2008. Now you might say, well, that it's because the population has grown. That's true. The population has grown, but also there's a lot of development that has occurred over this course of time and pushed bears out of certain areas and into roaming into other areas. The range of a female Florida black bear and a male Florida black bear vary widely. As you can see, for instance, if you take the first column here, Mobile, Alabama, a 3 square mile home range for the female, 25.9 square miles for the males. And that increases and as you go throughout the state. For instance, if you look at Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, 21 square miles for females, 132 for males. So there's no precise range for a male or a female black bear. It depends on where they are. This is an interesting chart that shows the estimated population of Florida black bears in Florida. As you can see in the top, in the 1500s, when Columbus arrived, the estimated population of Florida black bears was 11,500. That's an estimate based on the density of bears in in the Ocala National Forest as the entire state was forested. And then you see it 1914 start to drop down into about 3,000 bears. Now in 1940, that population goes all the way down to 300 bears, and it stays in that region for quite a while. You can see 1940, 1950, 1961, 530 to 860, 1969, 1,000 still, it's a very low number. 1971, 1972, 500, and the estimate drops down to 300 in 74, and that's when the Florida black bear is listed as a threatened species, and we're going to get to that in the next slide. But you see how the population had been very low from all the way through the 1940s, and I would say up until about 1994, when hunting of Florida black bear stopped. So the reason that the population went from 11,500 down to 300 can pretty much be hung on the fact that they were hunted all through that time. So that's the impact that hunting had on the population. Then when we get down towards the bottom, you get 2002, it's a range, and you have to think of this as a range, and there's not an exact number because you're not, for instance, you're not counting the number in the graduating class of UCF. The number of black bears in Florida is always going to be a range because they're elusive animals. They don't like to be counted. They don't want to be counted. They don't want to be seen. They're very much secluded in the forest. So we do different things. The FWC does different things in order to count them, to draw them out and get hair samples and determine how many are unique bears in the state. So the last population count, which they call an abundance study, said, and this is 2012 to 2015, that there were somewhere between 3,000 and 5,600 black bears in the United States. And I mean, not in Florida, excuse me. But the bear management likes to use a midpoint there to describe it as an exact number, but it's not an exact number. This chart talks about some of the significant dates regarding the Florida black bears in public policy. The first and probably the most important was 1974, when the Game Commission listed bears as a threatened species under the Florida Wildlife Code. So a lot of people think that the threatened status was something that was imposed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but it wasn't. It was actually the Fish and Game Commission in Florida listed it. But to go back, how many bears were there when that happened? There were 300. So it kind of shows you how low the population has to get before action is taken to protect their numbers. In 1978, the threatened designation was removed in a couple of counties in the Osceola and Apalachicola wildlife management areas. In 1990, U.S. Fish and Wildlife was petitioned to list the Florida black bear as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. And a year later, they came out with their ruling that denied the Florida black bear threatened status because they said it was warranted, but precluded by other higher priority listing actions, which makes no sense. if it's warranted, it's warranted, but that's kind of the history of black bears in Florida. In 1994, the remaining bear hunting seasons were closed statewide. So that's when bear hunting ended in the state of Florida. And then we get to 1998. 98 is when the Florida Constitution Revision Commission created the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. So that was put on the ballot and passed by the voters in 1998. In 1999, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife was sued for a decision not to list Florida black bears. And they were unsuccessful. Was Defenders of Wildlife were unsuccessful in obtaining a judgment to get the U.S. Fish and Wildlife to list the Florida black bear as threatened. In 2005, you can see that FWC released a report assessing the impacts of roads on bears, including population estimates for bears in 6 subpopulations. So in 2005, there's an important mile marker that the FWC has studied and becomes aware that vehicle strikes, road kills are going to be a problem with the bear population. In 2007, they formed a technical assistance group, and that is something that I've enjoyed being a part of. There are other people on this call who are also a part of the technical assistance group. So it includes not just hunting entities, but also conservation entities as well. In 2011, this was under the Rick Scott administration. The black bear was removed from threatened status. It was approved in June of 2011, and that caused a lot of uproar among people who had been following the public policy regarding black bears all along. And a lot of us felt as though it was heading in the direction 2015, where they reopened a hunting season in the central, east panhandle, north and south bear management units. There's a little footnote at the bottom of 2015. Lawsuit challenged that the FWC acted arbitrarily in reopening bear hunting season, sought an emergency temporary injunction to stop the season. Case was dismissed. Well, case was dismissed by the plaintiffs. And how do we know that? It's because Speak Up Wekiva was the plaintiff. In 2016, this Center for Biological Diversity, along with a number of other conservation organizations, filed again to list the Florida black bear as a threatened species under the Endangered Species Act. In 2017, the Fish and Wildlife declined to initiate a status review of the Florida black bear under the Endangered Species Act. Finding that the petition did not present substantial information that listing was warranted. So we get this graph that the FWC has put out about the population. I think this came out around 2015, that shows increases in the population from the last time that the study was done. And that is kind of misleading, because if you see, let's say the East Panhandle, 1,060, and they say it's up 86%. Well, 86% from what? From 2002. So over the course of 13 years, it's up 86%. So, these statistics can be manipulated to show a larger increase than's actually happened. So where do all the bear calls come from? These are people who call and say a number of different things about, there's a bear in my yard, there's a bear got into my trash, etc. And you can see that the calls come in largely from places, if you go back to the range, where bears are heavily populated. So where do the calls come from by that BMU is Bear Management Unit? 57% of them come from the Central Bear Management Unit, and that's largely the Ocala Forest, Wekiva area. That's where over half of the calls come from, and it's because you have a population of housing adjacent to the bears in their natural environment. So you see the second most is a tie between the east and the west panhandle, followed by the south, and then very low number of calls in the Big Bend and North region and South Central. Statewide reason for bear calls, and you see most of these, like general interaction, there's a bear in my yard, there's a bear went up a tree. Then you get into this second largest percentage, the bears in garbage, 29%, property damage, a sick or dead bear. And then you get down into the very, very, very low public safety incident, where a bear actually may have bluff charged or come in contact, in close contact with a person, where they felt as though the person or property was in danger. And in a lot of those cases, the bear gets killed. So how many bears have been killed over the recent years due to safety risks? You see year by year from 2009 to 2018. So we go from 23 a year up to a height in 2015 of 105 a year. So that's just in 6 years, almost 5 times the number being killed. But since that time, you see the number of bears that are killed due to safety risk has dropped dramatically, down to 2018 in this case, 27 bears. So what does that mean? It means that bears in recent years are within what's called the social carrying capacity. And it has nothing to do with the biological carrying capacity, how many bears can actually exist off the land. This is how many bears are there in relation to people making calls to the FWC, complaining, or possibly running into a case of where it's a public safety risk. So that's, if you look at the number of bears that have to be put down in relation to where it was, this is quite within the margin of being within the social carrying capacity. Now in 2015 and subsequent years, the way the quota would be calculated, this is the number of bears that can be killed in any one season, the season being, according to the rule, in the last week of October. If you take the estimated population and multiply that by 20%, there's an old study that said that you can take 20% of the population every year. That was a study that we contested in court. but they still go with that figure, 20%, and then subtract out the known mortalities. These are bears that have been killed in vehicle strikes or by the FWC or in some other fashion, and that gives the harvest objective. So that's how they come up with the harvest objective, is basing it on 20% of the population can be quote unquote taken in any given year. So if you were to look at the population from 2003 to 2015, you can see that there was a steady increase in bear mortality every year. And then when you get to 2015, the sector of that high column where 680 bears were killed was quote unquote harvest, 304 bears being killed in the 2015 hunt. But then there are also, as you can see in the brown segment, the road kills are the largest percentage of the population that are being killed every year is on the highways. The bear calls, as you can see, just like in the number of bears that were killed by safety risk from 2003, and it climbs up to 2013. That's where it maxes out in 2013. And then we have the hunt in 2015. And then the core complaints, which are actual encounters with bears, not physically, but in close proximity, those core complaints you can see have dropped pretty dramatically since 2013. The core complaints in 2022 were down a third of what they were in 2013. So in 2015, they said, oh, look at all these complaints are coming in. This is exponential. They're increasing exponentially. Well, they don't have that anymore because we're not seeing core complaints increase exponentially. As a matter of fact, they've decreased exponentially, or they've decreased, not exponentially, but steadily. The number of road kills by bear management unit, again, we see in the central bear management unit, the largest number, 57%, and then in the East Panhandle, 26%, and then smaller numbers around. But these are bears that are killed struck by vehicles. This is a chart of the number that have been struck by vehicles, and again, you see it from 2013, 2014, how that number kind of evens out. This past year, it was about 285, but that may be more in tune with the number of people on the roadways as opposed to the number of bears. So as we build more roads, as we push bears out of their habitat and have them roam to find new homes, they're more likely to be hit by cars and trucks. These are the vehicle strike mortalities. And you'll see these are roads largely going through bear habitat, going through the Ocala National Forest in areas like that. So as could be expected, you're going to have a lot more vehicle strike mortalities in bear habitat than you would outside of that habitat. So they've known this, again, back to 2005, that this was going to be a problem, but the programs to build overpasses and underpasses where these strikes take place has been anemic at best. So here's an interesting poll that was conducted by the FWC, and it said, you know, they asked different statements if you agree to these statements or don't agree with these statements. But you know, Florida black bears should be protected so future generations will see them. 93% of the people in the poll responded yes. It is important to know black bears exist in Florida, even if I never see one. 92%. Black bears are an important part of our ecosystem. 86%. I think seeing a black bear increases my appreciation of nature. 84%. Black bears are part of our heritage. In Florida, 84%. I enjoy seeing black bears in Florida, 74%. People should learn to live with black bears near their homes, 64%. So the overwhelming majority of the population wants to protect this species. And I think that's something that we have on our side. So the question comes up, will there be another hunt in 2023? The rules are already in the books, that there is going to be that opportunity for a hunt. The commissioners will vote on that, and that will be October 4th and 5th. That's likely when they take the vote to set the quota. Now, they could set the quota on the meeting before that, which is July. So will the quota be set in October? Will it be set in July? I think the important thing is we have to go to the meeting in July on the 20th and the 21st. And at that meeting, that's when we'll present our case that we don't want another bear hunt this year. And hopefully some of you on the phone or those who are watching afterwards will join us July 20th and 21st in St. Petersburg. We don't know exactly where that's going to be held, but we'll know about 30 days out. All right, thank you all.